Welcome to the Speech Acoustics and Physiology Laboratory with Kate Bunton and Brad Story. Dr. Bunton is an associate professor, associate department head, and director of graduate studies in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences. My name is Brad Story, and I'm also a professor in the department and serve as the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the College of Science. I'll be your host in this brief introduction to our laboratory. Much of our current research is centered on the development and use of a particular type of speech synthesizer called Tube Talker. Tube Talker is a computational, physically based model that simulates movement of structures, airflow, and production of sound. It is effectively a virtual talker that can be used to study many aspects of speech production and speech perception. Developing and using a model of speech production is somewhat like animating a short movie. A structure is precisely defined mathematically, and then is moved in time by changing the spatial positions of all parts of the structure. The result is a dynamic virtual object whose shape or other characteristics change over the time course of a specified action. Whereas the object in a cartoon or animation is the imaginary body of a character, for a model of speech production, the objects are mathematical representations of the tongue, velum, larynx, jaw, and lips, or in our case, a simplified form of them. That is, our model operates directly at the level of the shape of the vocal tract airway. These virtual structures can be moved by specifying postures that the model must attempt to achieve, as is shown in slow motion here. The changing shape in this animation produces the word abracadabra, but shown about 2.5 times slower than real time. Simultaneous with the change in vocal tract shape is the simulated generation of sound waves by vibration of the vocal folds, and their propagation or travel through the throat and mouth. The result is a sound wave that is similar to a recording of speech. It can be listened to, analyzed, and compared to natural speech. The animation of the vocal tract for abracadabra will now be played in real time along with the audio signal generated by the visible movements. It will be played 3 times.
Abracadabra. Abracadabra. Abracadabra.
This model is currently at the stage where it can be used to investigate research questions such as, what are the fundamental units of speech? How do children acquire the ability to speak? How do neurologic conditions imposed by disease affect speech production? And how do listeners separate the spoken message from the sound qualities of the person speaking? As an example of a type of study that can be performed with this model, we have recently been running experiments where words or a phrase are generated with increasing degrees of opening of the velopharyngeal port. The velum, or soft palate, functions as a valve or trapdoor that can be opened or closed to produce different types of speech sounds. Stop consonants like b, d, g, p, t, k require that the valve is tightly closed so that pressure can build up in the oral cavity to generate a burst when the consonant is released. Nasal consonants, like m, n, and ung, require the valve to be open so that sound and air can flow through the nose. A person whose velopharyngeal system does not allow for a tight seal may not be able to produce stop consonants, and their overall speech may sound nasalized or hypernasal. In our experiments, we can use Tube Talker to produce the same words or phrases many times, but with tiny changes in the amount of velopharyngeal opening. This collection of synthetic speech is then presented to listeners who respond based on what they hear. With this process, we can determine how much of a velopharyngeal opening can exist before a listener could actually detect any nasal quality. Results are clinically useful for understanding the limits for talkers with velopharyngeal insufficiency. This example is the word abracadabra again, but this time the velopharyngeal port is held open by a certain amount throughout the whole word. As the animation plays, the red triangle will represent the velopharyngeal opening. It will be played 3 times.
Abracadabra. Abracadabra. Abracadabra.
You likely heard a fairly nasal-sounding version of abracadabra, where the stop consonants have become nasal consonants. Instead of abracadabra, you may have heard something like amracanamra. The differences in sound between the first version of the word at the top
Abracadabra.
and the nasal version on the bottom
Abracadabra.
is that the acoustic energy visible in these spectrograms changes from being focused into clear bands, as indicated by the red, and possessing distinct breaks in the sound for the stop consonants, to being smeared between the bands, and you'll see the elimination of the breaks, except for the k sound. Experiments like this allow us to relate speech production to the perception of speech through an understanding of the acoustic characteristics. Other work in our lab follows a similar theme, to use the tube talker model as a tool to understand the complexities of speech. Thanks for stopping by to check out the Speech Acoustics and Physiology Laboratory.